Hello everybody. Welcome to the Neural Maze, my YouTube channel. In today's video, I wanted to show you how to build a chatbot application using Langchain and also Streamlit to be able to talk with HackerNews. Okay, so let's begin. Okay, so before we get into the coding stuff and we move into PyCharm, I thought it would be useful to show you the project that served as inspiration for this tutorial. Okay, the project is called NewsNerd HackerBot, and it's a project that I made a couple of months ago when I was trying to learn Streamlit, and the project lets you interact with HackerNews in very different ways. Okay, so if you click here into the project, you can, well, you just need to pass the OpenAI API key and you can start interacting with the chatbot. Okay, so let's say hi before, hello, because we are polite people, we are gentlemen. How are you? As an AI, I don't have feelings. Well, he says that, but I know for a fact that he has feelings. So don't be impolite with him, okay? Okay, so let's ask something about HackerNews. In this case, we are going to be focused just on listing stories of HackerNews. We are not going to get into some complex functionalities, but you will be able to check them if you get into the original repository right here, if you try to fork this up, for example. But in this case, we are just going to focus on listing stories from the HackerNews webpage, okay? So could you show me top 5 stories of HackerNews right now? So we wait for a couple of seconds, and here it is. You can see a beautiful markdown table with the 5 top stories, and if you don't believe me, which is all right, you can go here. For example, take the first one, Game of Life, simulating itself infinitely zoomable. And you get into the HackerNews webpage, and here it is. The first one, the top story right now in HackerNews with 368 points is the Game of Life simulating itself infinitely zoomable. Okay, so it seems to be working, and this is exactly the functionality that I want to implement with you guys today. Okay, so before we get into the code, let me show you one last thing, and it's the architecture that we are going to be following throughout the tutorial, okay? So as we said, we are going to interact with the chatbot using Streamlit, which you can see in the left side box. Then all the information, all the questions that we are asking the chatbot are going to be passed away to this LLM agent, which is implemented in Langchain. And it also has some subtlety because it's going to use the OpenAI function calling by using a tool, okay? I don't know if you are aware of how to implement your own tools in Langchain, using in this case, it's using a Pydantic model, but I will show you how to do it, okay? So just to recap, we sent a question using Streamlit. The question arrives into the LLM agent. The LLM agent uses the OpenAI function calling to convert the natural language processing question into a HTTP request, and we send the HTTP request into the HackerNews API. So for example, if we are asking for the top 5 stories in HackerNews, the Langchain agent will be in charge of transforming our question, show me the top 5 stories in HackerNews, into an HTTP request to the correct endpoint. And it will get all of the information available, and it will return the information to us in a very easy to understand way, for a human, at least. And that's it. So without further ado, let's get into PyCharm. All right, so here we are in PyCharm. It's time to start coding. So the first thing we are going to do is to import Streamlit and set some basic configurations. So first of all, we're just going to set the page config and the page title, which is going to be HackerBot, for example, and the title of this HackerNews application is going to be HackerBot as well. We also need to get the OpenAI API key from the config. I have put that information into the secrets toml so that I can access the API key like this by using the streamlit.secrets call. And you go here and you just have to pass the name you have defined for your secret, in this case OpenAI API key. Don't bother trying to copy the OpenAI key because I'm going to delete it as soon as I finish this video, so don't bother. Apart from this, I think that's it. I mean, with the config, let me run the Streamlit application one moment. Yeah, I think everything is set in terms of the configuration. And now we just need to introduce all the code relative to the tools and the LLM agent and the HackerNews call, basically. Okay, so the core functionality of this application. So we're going to start by defining memory, in this case, the memory that we are going to use with all the messages that the user is sending. And in this case, we are going to use a memory specific for Streamlit, which is defined in Langchain, and it's called the Streamlit chat message history, in conjunction with another object, which is called the conversation buffer memory. Let me show you how to do it. So first of all, we are going to import the Streamlit chat message history, and we're going to create one instance of this object. As the key, we can simply put Langchain messages. This is the internal key that is going to use. Langchain messages seems like a reasonable one. And then we also need to define the proper memory object. We are going to define with the conversation buffer memory. The chat memory is going to be our messages variable that we have defined in the previous line. That is, it's an instance of the Streamlit chat message history. And also we need to pass this flag to true. The return messages equals to true. Okay, cool. There's another thing that I think we should add, and it happens when a new user gets into the application. It will be nice for the chatbot to introduce himself. So we can do that in a very easy way by just checking the length of the messages list. Oops, this is messages.messages, I think. Well, that's it. It's equal to 0. Then we are going to add an AI message into the list of messages stored into the Streamlit message history. Okay, so in this case, for example, greetings human, I am a chatbot application. Okay, okie dokie. So let's continue. Now we need to define our LLM, which is very simple. I guess you have already worked with Langchain, and this isn't going to surprise you. So first of all, chat OpenAI object, we are going to set a temperature of 0. Choose whatever values you want. And the model is going to be the GPT. Let me copy the model 1 second because it's long. It's a GPT 3.5 Turbo because it's cheaper than the GPT-4s and all that stuff. And although we could, because I'm very lazy and I did it a couple of months ago, but we could be using some Mistral model or any open source model. But as I told you, I'm a bit lazy, so the GPT 3.5 seemed like a reasonable choice for this tutorial. Okay, and we need to also put here the OpenAI API key, which we have already gathered from the secrets toml. And now here, this is the tricky part. Now we have to define our agent, and we are going to use a method from Langchain, which is called initialize agent. You can check how this method behaves in any of the Langchain tutorials about agents. But in this case, we need it because we have to define a tool, as I told you before. So here we should be passing this, a tools variable, which contains a list of all the tools that the agent is going to be using. An agent, let me put the keywords, so tools, then the agent, the type of agent that we are going to use. In this case, we are going to use the OpenAI Functions type of agent. Let me do the imports. So here we're going to add the agent type, which is going to be an agent type of OpenAI Functions. And we are also going to add some quarks to the agent. This is basically something that we need to add for the inner working of the memory, okay, of the message placeholder that we are passing to the agent. But I mean, it's not very important for this tutorial, so you can simply skip it. Okay, let me check it here. Okay, the agent quarks. We are going to put the variables to true because I want to show you how it works when we start answering questions to the HackerBot. And finally, and this is the most important part, the memory, okay? Because otherwise he will forget about everything that we ask him. And this memory, as we saw before, it's just this conversation buffer memory that we imported from Langchain, okay? So I know that you are maybe worried about these tools, but I'm going to come back to this after we finish two things to have all the configuration set before we start building the tool. Okay, so in here we need to print all the messages, or to render all the user and bot messages in the Streamlit frontend. So we are going to use this chat message. We are going to loop over all the message.messages property, which has all the messages that has been exchanged between the user and the chatbot. And then we are just going to render all of this information in the Streamlit application. Okay, so chat message, we are going to define, we need to define the type of the message, whether it's a human or an AI. And finally, we are going to write the message content into Streamlit, okay? And finally, and this is something that I'm going to copy and paste because it's some boilerplate code, but oops, this is with Synceo. Let me change this 1 second. So we need in here to substitute this with the OpenAI agent.run, and we are going to use the prompt. Okay. And we're going to write the response that the agent is going to give using, again, the streamlit.chat message with type AI. Okay, so I think we have everything covered. If I try to run this right now, as you will expect, it's going to crash because we haven't defined any tools for this agent. So let me show you how to do this, okay? As I told you before, when I was showing you the architecture that we were going to follow, I told you that we will need to use the OpenAI function calling, okay? And this OpenAI function calling is going to allow us to transform the text, the question provided by the user, into an HTTP request, okay? So how can we do it? So first of all, first thing first, let's create a new module in Python, which is going to be called the tool.py, which seems reasonable. And inside, we are going to start by defining the Python functions, mere Python functions, plain Python functions, to interact with HackerNews, with the HackerNews API. Okay, so we are going to start by importing the requests library, and also, yeah, I think that with the requests library we are okay. We are going to, let me copy and paste this. This is the base URL we are going to be making calls to. It's the URL from HackerNews, and we are going to create a first function, which are going to call it fetch stories from HackerNews, for example, and we are going to pass it a limit parameter, which is going to default to none. Okay, so what am I trying to do in here? So the thing is that when the user asks for the top 5 stories, for example, in HackerNews, what is happening is that the LLM is transforming this information into a call to a specific Python function, which is wrapped by a tool. So in this case, what we need to provide the tool with, what we need to implement, it's the specific call we are making to HackerNews. In this case, we need a Python function that allows us to get the top 5 stories from HackerNews with a simple call. And that's the reason why we need the base URL of the API. Okay, so and also the limit, it's just a limitation of the number of stories that you want to provide. So when we asked the top 5 stories, this limit is going to receive a 5 from the LLM agent. So let's create here another constant, which is going to be the URL of the specific endpoint, and let's top stories.json. So this is the endpoint that we are going to choose to get all the information regarding the top stories of HackerNews. Of course, I'm discarding the news stories and the ask stories, all the different types of stories. I'm just focusing in this tutorial in the top stories, but that's something that you can check if you want to go to the original repository. You will be able to check the original implementation, which is in there. Now the request is really simple, because we just need to use the requests library to get from this URL the JSON. Let's put this JSON to get the list of story IDs. And if we are providing a limit, then the final story ID is going to be the story IDs until this limit. And finally, we're going to return the story ID. So let me put the debugger here, and I will show you how it works. Okay, so let's put here limit equals to 5, for example, and let's see how it goes. It will take some time to get all the stories from the top endpoint. And as you can see, we have here 5 stories, okay, with the 5 IDs. Okie dokie. So now, this is not ideal. I mean, it's okay, but it is not ideal, because we have the IDs, but we have no additional information. For example, the title, the author, the score, which we will need in order to provide some information to the end user. To do this, we are going to define another Python function again, which I have called fetch story info. And the parameter in this case is going to be the story ID, which is exactly the one that we saw in the debugger. And the URL is going to be a bit different than before. Let me copy and paste the URL. But in this case, we are going to attack this endpoint right here, okay? And we're just going to call the requests, get URL, and finally simply get the content, okay? Right, so let me wrap all of this with a final function. This is the proper function that's going to be called by the tool, which has all the logic, and it's going to call these sub-functions, these additional functions that we have just defined. In this case, the parameter is going to be the limit again. It's going to fetch the story IDs by using the fetch story IDs from HN, the function that we defined in the first place. Okay. And then it's going to loop over the story IDs and simply, that's it. And simply get all the available information, the title, the author, the score, etc., that we are going to use when we generate the response to the user. Dot append and fetch story info, story ID, and finally return the stories. Okay, let's see if this works or I missed something in the process. So yeah, let's put the default. It will take 5 stories, and let's see what it takes. Okay, let's see. All right, seems to be working. So the story 0, it's a bit difficult to show you, but oh yeah, look, the first story, it's just the game of life simulating itself, infinitely zoomable. So it seems like we implemented things correctly. So cheers for us. Cool. So now we just need to define the proper tool. And to do that, we need 2 things. We need to implement, or not to implement, to import Pydantic, because we need to define a model with Pydantic, and also the base tool object from Langchain. Okay, so first of all, we're going to define a Pydantic base model, inheriting from the base model. And we are just going to require a field, which is this one, which is the limit field. Okay, the default is going to be 5, and we're going to provide also a description, which is the limit number of stories to be fetched from HackerNews. Okay, so this is the model. This is we are going to use this to define the args schema of a tool, the type of data that the tool is expecting. In this case, it's going to expect just a limit param. Okay, so that's basically what the OpenAI function calling is doing. And underneath, what it's doing, Langchain is just transforming all of these Pydantic and base tools, etc., into the proper way of interacting with the OpenAI function calling. So that's basically what is happening underneath. And now we also need to define the proper tool. Okay, it inherits from the base tool, and it has a name, which is get HSNN stories, for example. I mean, whatever you want, and a description, which is let me think. This is a cool tool for interacting with HackerNews. I think that's a pretty cool name. And now we need to define the run method. You also have, there is something that I need to point out. As you can see, we are using all the time the requests library, and we are using synchronous functions. If you go to the original repository, you will see that I'm using async.io all the time, because it doesn't make any sense to use synchronous calls in this project. I mean, we need asynchronous calls, because suppose that a user asks for 200 stories, the top 200 stories of HackerNews, or 1,000 stories, for example. What will happen is that you will need to loop over each one of the story right here, each one of the 1000 stories, and you will need to fetch the relevant data for each one of them. And that's far from optimal. Okay, so right now it's okay because it's a tutorial and it's okay to do it synchronously, but just to let you know, you should be using async.io. And if you go to the original repository, you will see that everything is working with async.io and asynchronous functions. Okay, so yeah, just that piece of information. So we are using the _run. By the way, if we were using asynchronous calls, then it will be a run like this. Okay. But in this case, since we are using synchronous calls, we are going to implement the _run method. And the parameter that we are going to pass, as we already know, is the limit. So now we are going to call the function that we defined before, this one over here, with the limit parameter that we are going to pass to our tool. We return the stories, and now we need to define the args schema, which is this over here, and we need to pass the stories base model that we defined here. So this is the reason why we need it pydantic in this case, because we need to define the specific type of data or type of parameters that are going to be sent into a tool that the tool expects. Okay, so I think that's it. To be honest, I think we have implemented our first tool. So happy day, happy hour. Let's get back to the app.py, and now let's import our freshly new tool. From tool, import storage tool. And now we can go here and simply pass our tool to the parameters tool inside our agent. And now I think, if I'm not mistaken, guys, right now, if we run the application, it should be fine. It should be working. So let's see. This is not cool. Oh yeah, we forgot about the LLM. I mean, that's a common mistake. At least for me, I tend to forget about the LLMs. Okay, so we define the LLM here, and we just need to pass the LLM. Let me restart this. Oh yeah, okay. So, hello, how are you, man? Come on. Don't crash. Oh yeah, I don't have feelings. Yeah, this seems like pretty similar to the one we saw before. And now the tricky question, can you share with me the top story right now in HackerNews, please? Please. Come on. If it were asynchronous, it would be much faster, by the way. Okay, it's taking a lot of time. Oh yes, this is very beautiful. The top story on HackerNews right now is titled Game of Life Simulating Itself Infinitely Zoomable. It has a score of 894 and 184 comments, and you can read more about it here. Oh yeah, this is beautiful. This is beautiful, guys. We made it. So thank you very much for staying with me in this video, and I will put all the relevant links in the video description, and I hope I will see you in future videos. So good night, everybody.